All right, folks, today is bow day. My new bow just came in. I am here at the Fin, Feather, and Fur in Boardman, Ohio. But while I'm here, I want to pick up some arrows. I want to get a couple arrows that are factory spine aligned, and I'm going to show you what the problem with that actually is. So let's go pick up some arrows. Come with me. First of all, I need to define two different things. There's static spine and dynamic spine. Static spine of the arrow is the 300 or the 250, the right amount of flex from your bow. Then there's dynamic spine. The dynamic spine is how the arrow physically flexes from the bow. The first dynamic bend is also the weakest point of the shaft. So when you hear the term spine aligning, basically you're just marking a point on the shaft, which we'll talk about that point, calling that the spine, and doing that to all 12 of the shafts. Spine indexing, spine aligning, it is interchangeable. But what's the benefit of that? So when you mark that point on the arrow, that arrow is going to react a certain way when it's shot from your bow. So when you think of the archer's paradox, when you're shooting a compound bow with a release, the paradox is going to be vertical. So it's going to flex like this. You want to find all 12 arrows to flex from the same point, because when you tune your bow, you most likely tune it with one arrow. So when you put that arrow on the rest, on the string, shoot it, paper tune it, and do whatever you have to do, that arrow is reacting and bending a certain way. And that bending point is called the first dynamic bend, or it is the weakest point on the spine. That's very critical. There are a lot of folks talking about spine aligning, spine indexing, and there are some different schools of thought. There are factories that are spine aligning full shafts. There are people saying that you can't mark the spine by putting force down because the bow is shot this way. So we're going to talk about that all today. But first I want to talk about spine alignment on a full length shaft. The problem with that is when you take this arrow, this is a multi-layered carbon arrow. It is not aluminum, it is not extruded. So the spine inside of this shaft is not perfectly linear. That spine is going to rotate along the shaft. So when you have a full length shaft that comes to you spine aligned, that spine mark, the weak point of the arrow, is going to be different as you cut the arrow. So let's show that now. So here I have a full length shaft. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on this arrow, and I'm going to feel for a valley. See how this arrow wants to snap back at me? There's a valley in this shaft. There's going to be multiple of those, so you want to play around with it and find the one that is the strongest. So see, here's another valley. Rotate, there's another valley. So we want to feel and make sure we are marking the one that is the strongest, the hardest to get out of. And right here it is for me. So I'm going to take my Sharpie and make sure I'm marking the top end of that shaft. So as you can see, that point wants to bounce back. That Sharpie mark is based off of this full length shaft. So I'm going to go over to my saw, I'm going to cut it down, and we're going to watch this point rotate throughout the shaft. So I took that full length shaft, cut it down to 29 inches. So let's adjust our PAP system. And now we can see that the spine mark has rotated. Now it's not a whole lot of deviation, but this was over here previously, and now it has moved. So let me mark this again, and that'll better show you. So there you have your two different spine marks as we cut the shaft. So let's cut this shaft down a little bit further and show how that rotates. And now look where the spine is. So full length shaft, 29.5 inches, 26.5 inches. So that spine is spiraling along this shaft. So that mark that we're putting on there is the weak point of the spine. That is very, very critical. Every arrow that comes out of here is going to be spine aligned on the weak point. There are other manufacturers that are marking the spine on their shafts. Like I said, number one, they're marking the full length shaft. Number two, they're actually marking the stiff point of the arrow. That is flawed in my opinion. I'm going to grab another arrow shaft here to illustrate this. So we have multiple weak points in this shaft. There's going to be one stiff point in the shaft, but the stiff point is not a 180-degree difference between the weak point and the strong point. It's a lot easier for me to show you the variation between the stiff point and the weak point with an arrow that has the stiff point marked. That has nothing to do with the brand. I just want to show that the stiff point and the weak points are not related. And I'm going to find the valley, which is the weak point of the arrow. Okay, so there's the valley. That's the weak point right there. So I'm going to mark that. Now you may think that the stiff point is going to be 180 degrees from this, so I'll put a mark down there. And as you can see, this is the spine aligned mark. That is the stiff point of the arrow. Here's my weak point, right here. It's almost 90 degrees from the stiff point of the arrow. That's the opposite of the weak point, which as you can see is also 90 degrees from the stiff point of the arrow. So the problem with marking the stiff point is the arrow is going to flex on the weakest point, and it's not a direct correlation with the stiffest point of the arrow. You're going to have variance. Keep in mind the goal of this is to have all of your arrows reacting the same way at launch, so you want them all to flex from the same point, the first dynamic bend. That is the key with all of this. If you want them all to react the same, for best practice, cock vane on the weakest point of the arrow, you're not going to have any issues. There's another school of thought though I want to cover too. I watched some videos and there's guys talking about this form of spine aligning, spine indexing being flawed because when a bow is shot, it doesn't put force down on the arrow. It puts force here on the arrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that it doesn't matter. We're finding the weakest spine in the arrow, the weakest point. And no matter which way you're putting force on it, that's what matters. So, weak point. Again, let me find an arrow that I haven't marked yet. You can see very clearly that there is a big valley right there. This is the weakest point in the shaft. I'll put a big line. All right, in the simplest form, the arrow, when pressure is put on it from the string, it's going to flex on the weak point. So it's going to flex like this. So let's go show that on another tool. All right, so we have our bar clamp here. I'm going to put a level on it and make sure that the bar clamp is level, and then we'll level the arrow inside of it, because to get an accurate result from this, the arrow has to be square and level so it has even pressure pressed on it. So our bar clamp itself is level, and then we'll put this arrow in here. Make sure this arrow is in the very center of this so we have even pressure. Okay, it's in line there. Okay, so the arrow is level. We have it level inside of our bar clamp. The arrow is in the center of the pressure point. So as I put flex on this, pressure on this is like your string, your bow string, putting flex in it. It's going to flex down, just like that. See that? Down. That's the weak point that we marked. With the PAP system, press down on the arrow, found the valley, the weak point. Now we're putting pressure like a bowstring, and it's flexing right on the point. You can see, look at that. So, cock vane goes here, you shoot your bow. Every arrow that is marked like this is going to react the very same way, so you get a fully consistent dozen of arrows. Really quickly, just to recap, spine aligning, finding a consistent mark on the arrow so they react the same way. That point needs to be the weak point. You also have to spine align after the arrow is cut because of the spiral, non-linear spine inside the shaft. The goal of this is to get all of your arrows shooting the very same way. This process is a heck of a lot quicker than knock tuning, so it gives you consistency within all of your arrows so you can just take them out of the box, shoot, and enjoy. If you guys want properly spine aligned arrows coming from us here at Exodus, head to the website exodusoutdoorgear.com and use the Exodus dynamic tailor-built arrow building system and build you a set of arrows. They're going to come to you pre-spine aligned just like this here.